Hey everyone, I want to talk today about how to make the leap to senior engineers. So, a lot of newer software engineers, when they start out, um, they work with more senior engineers in their team, and they have questions about, how do I make the leap? How do I make the transition? And they don't quite understand, what does it mean in terms of their role, in terms of their time, what skills do they need in order to be considered a senior engineer? And typically, the bar for senior engineer is different in every company, but generally speaking, there's some guidelines, and I want to share that with you today. So, I think for me, the main difference between what's considered a senior engineer and someone who is an intermediate or junior engineer is that now you are the emphasis changes from how can you be successful as an engineer to your focus must be on how can the team be successful. So a senior engineer typically influences, guides, coaches more junior engineers. So you really must make a shift in your mindset. You can't be considering like just working on your own individual project, your own individual feature. If the rest of your project falls apart, then you're not really fulfilling your role as a senior engineer. So there's three areas where I think really there's a difference between being a senior engineer and a more junior engineer. The first is in ownership. So you're increasingly expected to own some part of your team's output. And this may mean setting the engineering roadmap, or at least being an influencer or an advisor here, and technology choices. And the ownership means that your responsibilities have changed compared to when you were an individual engineer. You're changing in terms of your timescale. So you should be much more involved earlier in the planning and decision making. And you should be thinking beyond the immediate bug fix that's right in front of you and looking ahead to see what the potential challenges are next month, next quarter, next year, and so on. Secondly, you're also looking more at the technical aspect. So you need to own not just the code itself, but also non-technical aspects, which means your communication skills and your project management skills will be increasingly important. So you're responsible for the business and the product goals, not purely code implementation. And lastly, it really means that there's no excuses anymore. So your role means that you're responsible for making that the team and the project successful. So you should be proactively taking steps to ensure this. You're expected to tackle common reasons for unsuccessful projects. So, think about unclear requirements or technical design flaws, external partner communication, things like that. As the senior engineer on the team, you're responsible for handling these. So that's it. Ownership is the first thing. Like your ownership really needs to change. Secondly, when you look at skills, so the skills that you need as a senior engineer are slightly different, and they build on what you've built so far as an intermediate or junior engineer. The first part is communication. So part of your role will include discussing your project or your feature with internal and external parties. The reality is that when you were a junior engineer, perhaps you were just writing code, like maybe 90% of your day. As a senior engineer, that percentage will drop. You're going to be spending more time on project management and communication. And the second part of your skills that need work on is like project planning. So you need to seek to reduce risk for your project, and you need to be able to communicate early and often about the status of your team's output. And lastly, the skills are for a senior engineer also involve some element of people skills. So even if you're not directly a manager, it's likely a need that you'll need to balance some form of people management, as you're probably responsible for shuffling various other engineers on your project. And lastly, where the differences between a senior engineer is your time allocation will change. So you should expect your day-to-day work to change in terms of number one, planning. So expect to spend more time planning, both at the feature and the product level, and at the quarterly, yearly level, and so on. Reviews, you'll probably be spending 10 to 40% of your time reviewing work from other engineers. So it might be a design review, it might be a code review, and so on. But you really need to be providing guidance there. And thirdly, your time allocation, your mindset should be much more forward thinking. So as a junior engineer, you pretty much work on what's on the plate in front of you. As a senior engineer, you need to think ahead. So you need to be dedicating some time to thinking about potential blockers, improvements in your area of responsibility. And the key thing is you must do that before it happens. So that's one of the main differences. All right. I wrote all this down on our website, swepro, swepro.co.co. So if you want to read this in more detail, have a look at our website. See ya.